When the knocking started, I thought it was the wind. Out here, on the edge of the forest, the night carries strange sounds. I was sitting by the stove, the kind of quiet evening you learn to treasure when you live alone, when something heavy scraped against my door. It wasn't the shuffle of branches, it wasn't the snap of a raccoon on the porch, it was weight, deliberate weight. I froze. My first thought was, someone's out there, but who would come this far, this late? Then it came again. 3 dragging blows across the wood, followed by a thud so deep it shook the frame. My heart climbed into my throat. I reached for the lantern and against all sense unlatched the door, and there she stood, a bear, a full-grown female, massive, her shoulders nearly filling the doorway. For a second my body betrayed me. I couldn't breathe, my whole chest locked because her muzzle was slicked red. Blood, it glistened under the lantern light, dripping down to her chest. I should have slammed the door. I should have grabbed the rifle still hanging above the mantel, the same one I carried decades ago when I hunted. But my hands wouldn't move. I just stared into her eyes. And what I saw there wasn't rage. It wasn't the wild fury I knew a bear could carry. It was something else. Her gaze locked on me, steady and searching, as if she recognized me, as if she knew who I was. My knees weakened. I'd stood face to face with wild animals before, but never like this, never with the feeling that the animal was the one deciding if I belonged here. She didn't growl. She didn't lunge. She only breathed, heavy and ragged, her chest heaving, and every few seconds she shifted her weight, almost impatient, but not hostile. The blood terrified me, but it wasn't hers. I could see no wound, no torn flesh. My mind raced. Had she just killed? Was she warning me, or was this something else? I remember whispering out loud, though I hadn't meant to, "What do you want from me?" Her ears flicked. She blinked slowly, and for the briefest moment, I swear I saw plea, like she was asking, not threatening, like she was waiting for me to understand. I thought then, this is the end. She came for me. Some mistake, some ancient balance, and now she'll take her payment. I could already picture the news. Old man torn apart outside his cabin, foolish enough to open the door, but she didn't move. Instead, she took one step backward, just one, enough to clear the threshold as though she was leaving space for me, and then she looked over her shoulder into the darkness of the forest and back at me again. My breath caught. My chest ached from holding it. She was showing me something. I don't know why I didn't slam the door right then. Maybe it was the years I'd lived in these woods, watching them teach lessons no book could hold. Maybe it was guilt, memories of the animals I'd hunted when I was younger, the pelts I'd carried, the blood on my own hands. Maybe it was simply that look in her eyes. She looked at me like she knew who I was, like she remembered me, and for reasons I still can't explain, I stepped outside. The cold bit my skin, but I barely felt it. My whole body trembled, not from the air, but from the weight of the moment. The bear stood barely 10 feet away now, her breath puffing white in the lantern glow, the blood on her muzzle catching the light like some cruel mask. I waited for the rush, for her to drop me where I stood, but she only held my gaze another second, then turned toward the trees. That was the instant when my world cracked open, because in her movement there was no randomness, no wild aimlessness. It was deliberate, a gesture, almost like an invitation. She wanted me to follow. The thought itself was madness. A man doesn't follow a bear into the forest if he wants to live to tell it. And yet, the pull was stronger than fear. My heart hammered so hard it made me lightheaded. My fingers clenched around the lantern handle until it burned my palm. Every instinct screamed, "Get back inside, shut the door, survive." But another voice, quieter, cut through. "This isn't chance. I thought I had seen everything these woods could show me. I was wrong. I believed for a moment that she had come for me, that it would end in blood and silence. I thought this was the last night of my life, but nature was preparing another answer, and that answer shook me more than death itself. The first step outside felt like betrayal of every survival instinct I had left. My boots touched the frost-stiffened ground, and the lantern in my hand trembled so much the flame stuttered against the glass. I half expected her to wheel around, rear up, and crush me where I stood. But she didn't. The bear backed away another pace, slow and deliberate, her shoulders rolling like waves of muscle under her thick coat. Then she stopped, waited. Her eyes never left me. I realized with a jolt that she wasn't retreating. She was giving me space to follow. My mouth went dry. The silence was suffocating, only the crackle of the lantern and the distant groan of the trees shifting in the night. I took another step forward, slow, as if moving through a dream. My heart slammed so hard I thought it might burst through my ribs. And then she turned. Not all the way, just enough to angle her body toward the forest. She looked over her shoulder at me, held my gaze, then stepped forward into the dark. It was unmistakable. She was leading me. My knees weakened. I actually laughed under my breath, a sharp, desperate sound. It made no sense. I should have been backing away, shutting myself in the cabin, bolting the door. Instead, I found my boots crunching forward in rhythm with hers, as if some unseen tether had hooked me to her movements. Every few strides, she glanced back. Those eyes, they weren't the glassy, mindless orbs of a beast. They carried weight, purpose. I felt as though she was checking to see if I'd understood, if I had the courage to keep following. I whispered again without meaning to, "Where are you taking me?" She kept walking. The forest swallowed us quickly. The faint glow of my cabin fell behind until it was just a memory of safety. Ahead, the trees stood tall and silent, their black arms blotting out the stars. Each step I took felt like sinking deeper into a story I shouldn't belong to. My pulse pounded in my ears, my free hand clenched and unclenched as if it wanted to grab a weapon, though I had none. I remembered every hunting tale I'd ever heard, bears dragging men into the brush, tearing them apart, burying them under leaves. That was the image my mind painted over and over as we moved further from the only light I knew. She stopped suddenly. My breath hitched. The lantern shook violently. She swung her massive head back toward me, eyes locking onto mine once more. She didn't move, just stood, waiting. It was so clear it made my skin prickle. She wasn't luring me blindly. She was guiding me step by step, making sure I didn't falter. Still, the fear gnawed. I couldn't shake it. At any moment she could decide I wasn't worth sparing, that the strange mercy she showed at my door had expired. My mind screamed, "She's leading you away from witnesses, away from the scent of your cabin, into the heart of the dark where no one will ever find you." That thought froze me in place. My breath came in harsh bursts, clouding in the cold air. My legs refused another step. And then, as if she knew, she turned back again. This time, she held my gaze longer, not with menace, but with something else, something I still can't name. Her body shifted slightly, a patient angle, like a mother coaxing a frightened child. My throat tightened. She wasn't rushing me. She was waiting for me. That was the moment my fear cracked, just a little, and something else seeped in, a strange, raw trust. I lifted my foot and set it down again, closing the gap, and as soon as I moved, she moved. We continued. Step, pause, glance. Step, pause, glance. Minutes stretched like hours. The deeper we went, the more impossible it felt. I should have turned back. I should have run, but her steady glances held me like chains. I thought then, this is what she wanted all along, to draw me from the safety of my walls, deeper into her territory, until the time came to end it. The blood on her muzzle flashed in my memory, and I could see myself torn apart just as easily. I was convinced she was leading me away from my home to finish what she'd started, but I was wrong. Nature had another plan waiting in the dark, and it would break me in ways I never imagined. The deeper we went, the more the night closed around me. The lantern's glow seemed pitiful against the weight of the forest. Branches clawed at my coat. The air was thick with silence, broken only by her heavy steps ahead of me. Every sound felt magnified: the snap of a twig, the crunch of my boots, the rasp of my own breath. I kept asking myself what kind of madness had dragged me from the safety of my cabin. Each step farther from it felt like leaving the world I understood and entering one I had no right to walk in. And still, I followed. Then I noticed it. The ground beneath the lantern's glow changed. The snow wasn't smooth anymore. It was torn, disturbed, pressed down by weight. My breath fogged as I crouched, the lantern light trembling in my hand. There, stamped into the crust, were broad paw prints and drag marks. Something heavy had thrashed here, and then I saw the red, dark patches staining the snow, seeping into its crust like spilled ink. Not a trick of the light. Blood, drops, smears, pools. My stomach turned. I raised my eyes to the bear. She stood a few yards ahead, waiting, her breath rising in pale clouds. For a moment I thought the blood belonged to her. My heart squeezed in panic. But again, no wound, no limp. She was whole. The truth settled heavier. This was fresh. This had happened tonight. A shiver crawled my spine. Something violent had torn through this patch of forest, and she wanted me to see it. We moved further. The marks became clearer, more frantic. Branches snapped, snow churned, as though a desperate struggle had taken place. I stepped carefully, feeling the story unfold under my boots. Then she froze. Her head swung low, ears flat, a guttural growl rolling out of her chest. My heart seized. For one blinding second, I thought she'd turned on me. I stumbled back, lantern jerking, but her eyes weren't on me. They were locked on the shadows ahead. I followed her gaze. Shapes flickered in the dark, just beyond the edge of the lantern's reach. The rustle of wings, a flash of movement on the ground, then the sharp, sly yip of a fox, carrion feeders. The growl in her throat deepened, swelling into a roar that shook the air. It cracked through the forest like thunder. The fox bolted, wings flapped wildly as crows burst upward from the snow. The trees seemed to shiver with the sound. I staggered where I stood, every nerve sparking. She hadn't roared at me. She had roared them away, protecting something. When the last flutter of wings faded, she turned her head back to me. Her eyes blazed, not with fury, but with fierce command, as if to say, "Keep coming, don't stop now." I swallowed hard and stepped forward again, though my legs shook. The snow ahead was a battlefield. More blood, more drag marks, clumps of fur scattered like torn fabric. I bent closer, the lantern throwing long shadows across the wreckage. I couldn't tell what had fought here, only that it had been savage and recent. My throat dried. My mind searched for logic. Had she killed something? Was this her kill site, the reason her muzzle dripped red? Yes, that had to be it. The answer was staring me in the face. She had taken down prey, fought off scavengers, and now was dragging me here to... What? Show off? Claim territory? Warn me not to cross her path again? It made sense. Too much sense. I straightened, exhaling, convincing myself I finally understood. I told myself she wasn't leading me into mystery, but into explanation. Her strange behavior had an ordinary end. A kill. I decided right there that I'd solved it. She was just an animal after all, a predator, a mother perhaps, defending her ground. I thought it was over. I thought the mystery was gone. But I was wrong. The truth waiting in the dark was nothing like I imagined. And it wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. The forest suddenly opened into a hollow. a ragged dip in the ground where fallen trees had collapsed years ago and lay rotting in a tangle. Snow had drifted into the gaps, half burying the jagged trunks, leaving black holes like gaping mouths. The bear slowed. Her great shoulders hunched as she padded forward, her breath misting heavy in the cold air. She stopped at the edge of the hollow and swung her head toward me. That look, steady, burning, rooted me to the ground. I lifted the lantern higher. Its glow reached down into the tangle, and what it revealed knocked the air from my lungs. There, wedged between the splintered trunks, was a smaller shape. At first, I thought it was just another carcass, some unlucky animal that had fallen in and been left for dead. But then it moved, a faint shiver, a small cry, thin and broken, like a whimper. My chest seized. It was a cub, a bear cub, half buried in snow, its little flank heaving with shallow breaths, one leg twisted unnaturally, pinned between branches, its fur matted with blood, dark stains spreading across its side. Its eyes blinked once, glazed with pain, then closed again. I staggered back a step, my own breath ragged. My heart hammered against my ribs with a different rhythm now. Not just fear, but something sharper, deeper. The mother bear turned to me. That look, I will never forget it. It was not wild rage. It was not warning. It was raw, pleading. Her body trembled with power barely held in check, but her eyes begged me. I don't know how long we stood like that, staring at one another with the wounded cub between us. My mind screamed this was insane. She could tear me apart in an instant, crush me before I could even cry out. And yet, she didn't. She stood frozen, as though the entire forest held its breath, waiting to see if I would understand. It struck me then. She had led me here for this. Not for prey, not for territory. For this. The cub whimpered again, a thin, helpless sound that carved into me deeper than any claw could. I whispered, almost to myself, "You want me to help." She shifted, her weight pressing into the snow, but she didn't advance. Her head dipped low, then rose again. A gesture, a command, a plea. The world spun, my thoughts tangled. How could this be real? A wild creature, one of the fiercest on earth, not only sparing me but trusting me with her most precious life. I dropped to my knees at the edge of the hollow. My hands shook so badly the lantern rattled. I set it down in the snow, the flame flickering against the black wood. My breath plumed in frantic bursts as I leaned closer. The cub was trapped tight, its paw wedged deep, its body scraped raw from the struggle. I could see where the branches had cut into flesh. Every instinct told me to back away, that the mother would never allow this, that the moment I touched her cub, she would end me. But she only stood there, chest rising and falling, her eyes drilling into mine. I stretched a hand toward the little one, my fingers trembling inches from its fur. For a moment, I thought I saw the mother's muscles twitch, as if ready to spring. My heart nearly exploded in my chest, but then she stilled again, waiting. I touched the cub. Its fur was damp with blood and cold with snow. The tiny body flinched weakly, but no cry came. I swallowed the lump in my throat and gripped the branch pinning its leg. It wouldn't budge. I tried again, straining, the wood groaning under my weight. The mother gave a low rumble, not a threat this time, but a sound that vibrated like pain itself. I don't know if it was meant to urge me on, but it poured strength into my arms. I pulled harder, teeth clenched, until the branch cracked and the cub slipped free into the snow. I cradled it for the briefest second, feeling its tiny chest quiver against my hands before setting it gently down. The mother surged forward then. My heart jolted. This was it. She would kill me for touching her young. I braced myself, but she didn't. She bent low, her massive head lowering until her muzzle touched the cub, licking, nuzzling, a sound breaking from her chest that was almost Relief. I sagged back, my whole body trembling, my breath ragged. I thought that was it. I thought the story ended there. I had helped, and she had her cub again. Simple, finished, but I was wrong. That moment was not the end. It was only the first step into something I still can't explain. The cub lay in the snow, shivering, its breath shallow, its paw twisted unnaturally. I had freed it from the worst of the trap, but the damage was clear. The leg was swollen and raw, blood crusted where the wood had cut deep. I hovered over it, unsure if my touch was salvation or blasphemy, and behind me I felt her, the mother, her weight pressed on the air itself. Every breath she exhaled hit my neck like heat from a furnace. I could hear the grind of her teeth, the low rumble rolling in her chest. I didn't dare turn fully, but I knew she was inches behind me, close enough to end me in a heartbeat. My hands shook as I reached again for the cub. It whimpered, a faint, broken cry, and that sound went through me like a blade. Compassion warred with terror inside me. Everything in me screamed, "Don't touch it, don't risk it." But another voice, deeper, older, whispered, "If you walk away now, you'll never forgive yourself." I slid my hands under the cub's body. Its small ribs fluttered like a bird in my palms. The mother's growl deepened, vibrating through the hollow. My chest clenched so tight it hurt. "I'm trying," I whispered, though I knew she couldn't understand the words. My voice shook anyway. "I'm helping." Her hot breath washed over me. My skin prickled. My heart hammered so violently I thought it might tear free. For a moment I was certain she would lunge, rip me away from her young for daring to touch what was hers. But she didn't. She hovered there, trembling with tension, her every muscle taut, but she didn't strike. She let me lift him. The cub's paw was still trapped by a splinter of wood, tangled in fibers of bark. I braced the tiny limb carefully, trying to free it without breaking bone. My fingers grew slick with blood. My head spun from the closeness of death at my back. That's when I felt it, the full force of her presence. Her breath touched my ear, damp and hot, and my whole body seized. My heart pounded so violently it was pain. I thought, she'll kill me now. This is it. I could picture her jaws closing, the crunch of bone. My imagination filled in every grisly detail. And still, my hands didn't stop. They moved on their own, tugging the wood away from the cub's paw, lifting gently, freeing each matted hair from the splinter's grip. The cub whimpered again, but softer this time, almost a sigh. Its small body sagged into my hands, as if it had surrendered its fight to me. That was when the branch gave way with a sharp crack. The cub jerked free, collapsing into the snow. My palms were stained red, my breath ragged. The forest held its breath. I froze, waiting for the blow. When I pulled the cub out, I was certain it would be my last act. I thought she would tear into me for daring to hold her child, for smearing his blood across my hands. I braced, every muscle locked, my face twisted away, waiting for the rush of claws, but it never came. Instead, she stepped forward. The ground shook under her weight. She nosed past my shoulder, so close I felt the coarse fur of her cheek brush my coat. My heart nearly exploded. I thought it was the start of the end. Then she lowered her massive head, not to me, but to the cub. Her tongue swept across his wounds, a sound like soft sobbing rumbling from her chest. She licked, nuzzled, breathed into him as though calling him back to life. I sat frozen, my hands useless, my body trembling in the snow. She hadn't killed me. She had let me hold her cub, let me free him, let me set him down alive. I thought then that this was the end of it, that I had done my part, that she had her young again, and my life would be spared. I told myself the story was finished, but nature was not finished with me. What came next was something I never could have imagined. The cub whimpered weakly in the snow, its tiny body twitching as though unsure it had survived. My hands were still stained red, my breath torn in ragged bursts. Every nerve in me screamed to run, to scramble away from that hollow before the mother remembered what I was, but she didn't move toward me. She bent, her massive frame lowering with impossible grace, and pressed her muzzle to the cub. The sound she made was not the roar of a predator, it was soft, aching, almost a sob. She licked at his wounds, sweeping her great tongue over his matted fur, pausing to breathe into his tiny ear. The cub whimpered again, and I thought I saw his body relax. I sat frozen, unable to believe what I was witnessing. This was not the blind rage of the wild. This was tenderness. This was love so raw, it pulled tears to my eyes before I could stop them. She nudged him gently, then gathered him against her chest with a paw the size of a shovel, cradling him as though he were no heavier than a leaf. Her eyes never left him, not even for the span of a breath. Then, slowly, she lifted her head and looked at me. I swear the forest stopped breathing. Her eyes burned into mine, and what I saw there was not hunger, not threat, not even suspicion. It was something else, something human, yet beyond human. Gratitude. I shook my head hard, blinking, certain my mind was twisting the truth. But she held my gaze, and in that gaze was no mistake. She knew what I had done. She knew I had touched her cub, freed him, spared him. And then, God help me, I swear she nodded, just the slightest dip of her head. A movement so subtle I might have imagined it, but no, it was real, a gesture of thanks. I felt my chest collapse inward, my throat closed tight, my whole body trembled as tears blurred my vision. I had never, not once in my long life, seen an animal do something so deliberate, so intentional, so impossible. It was as though the barrier between us had cracked, and for a fleeting moment, we understood one another. She held that silence for what felt like forever. Then she turned back to her cub, still clutched close to her chest, and shifted her great body as though preparing to leave. The spell broke. I sagged back onto my heels, my breath coming in gasps, every muscle drained. My mind spun. I told myself this was it. She had her young again. She would vanish into the night, and I would never see her again. I thought the story had ended there, that I had been given a miracle glimpse into a world no man should see, and that the miracle was already over. I believed she would take her cub and disappear, and I would return to my cabin, shaken but alive, carrying a secret too heavy to tell. That's what I thought. That's what I told myself as I watched her shift, her back muscles rippling in the lantern light, her cub tucked safe against her. But I was wrong. She was not leaving yet. And what she showed me next shattered every truth I thought I knew about the forest, about animals, about life itself. I thought it was finished. She had her cub in her arms, and I was sure she would vanish into the dark, back into the life where I could never follow. But she didn't. She turned. Slowly, with the cub pressed to her chest, she shifted her massive frame toward the deeper forest. Then she stopped, swung her head over her shoulder, and fixed me with that same burning gaze. It wasn't over. The message was as clear as if she had spoken aloud. Come. I shook my head, half in disbelief, half in refusal. My whole body screamed that I had already risked enough, and yet my boots moved, one step, then another. She waited until I followed, then turned again and moved forward. Step, glance, step, glance. Each time she looked back at me, it was as though she tethered me tighter to her path. We left the hollow behind, and the forest grew darker, thicker, almost choking. My lantern light barely cut the blackness, but she moved with unerring certainty, never faltering, never hesitating. I stumbled, tripped, muttered curses under my breath, but I didn't stop. Minutes stretched into something else. Time lost meaning. I no longer knew how far from my cabin we were, or how long I had been trailing her. All I knew was that my heart kept hammering and that every look she gave me was pulling me deeper into something I couldn't name. Then I saw it. The trees opened just enough to reveal a patch of churned snow, a scar in the earth. The air here felt different, heavier, colder, tainted. My stomach dropped. Even before the lantern's light swept across the ground, I felt it in my bones. There, half buried in snow, were twisted shards of iron. A trap. Its jaws had been sprung, bent and broken from the force of her struggle. The bloodstains around it were dark and dried, seared into the snow like a brand. Splinters of fur clung to the metal teeth. I froze. The cub's cries, the wounds, the twisted paw, it all made sense. This was where it had happened, where men had set steel in the soil, waiting for whatever beast wandered too close, where her little one had stepped, innocent, and been caught. She stopped at the edge of the scar, her head lowering, her breath steaming like smoke from a fire that would never go out. She shifted the cub in her arms, pressing him closer, then lifted her eyes to me. I nearly dropped the lantern. She had brought me here to see. I whispered into the night, my voice breaking. She showed me what I wasn't meant to see. The trap glinted in the lantern's glow, cruel and silent. I remembered the weight of rifles in my own hands, the sting of blood on the snow from animals I'd hunted in years past. Shame burned through me, hot and sharp, until I couldn't tell if the tears on my face were from guilt or awe. The forest pressed closer, as if listening. Her stare pinned me in place. She wasn't only showing me her cub's pain, she was showing me ours, the ugliness of what people left behind, the cruelty we carried into the wild. I couldn't breathe. My chest ached with the truth of it. For a long time, she stood there, unmoving, holding her cub, her gaze locked on me. The silence between us felt heavier than any words could bear. I thought then that maybe she was simply leading me away from the hollow, that all of this was just her way of guiding me out so she could disappear. That's what I told myself, trembling there in the cold, the broken trap gleaming at my feet. But I was wrong. She hadn't led me away. She had led me back to the place where it all began. And what came next would tear apart the last of my disbelief. The broken trap lay before me like a wound in the earth, rusted iron jaws smeared with the dried memory of blood. My lantern flickered against it, throwing jagged shadows across the snow, and every glint of metal cut me deeper than any blade could. She had brought me here on purpose. That realization hit with the force of a hammer. She hadn't only wanted me to save her cub, she hadn't only needed my hands where hers could not go. No, she wanted me to see, to know, to stand in the very place where her world had been torn open. She trusted me enough to show me her pain. I felt my knees weaken, my breath caught, shallow, ragged. The cub whimpered in her embrace, shifting weakly, and she bent to nuzzle him again, but her eyes never left me. The weight of that stare pinned me harder than chains, and in it, I felt accusation. Not wild rage, not the blind fury of an animal defending its young, something far sharper, a mirror. I saw myself in that trap. The truth ripped me open. I had once been no better than the men who laid this steel. I had tracked, hunted, pulled the trigger. I had seen animals collapse into the snow and felt nothing but pride. I had lived years with the belief that the forest was mine to take from, mine to bend to my needs. Now here I was, face to face with the cost of that belief. My throat tightened. Shame burned my cheeks hot even in the bitter air. My heart thrashed between fear and sorrow until I thought it would break my ribs. I whispered into the cold, not to her, but to the dark around us. I'm sorry. The words cracked, torn from somewhere deep inside me. She didn't move. She just watched, breathing heavy, her cub pressed close. And for the strangest moment, I thought she understood. Fear still curled in me like barbed wire. I never forgot that she could kill me in an instant, but something else pushed against it now. Gratitude. Gratitude for being spared. Gratitude for being allowed to witness this truth. Gratitude that she had let me help when every law of the wild should have forbidden it. I felt small before her, small before the forest. A man stripped bare of illusions. My hands still shook, stained with her cub's blood. They looked like the same hands I had once lifted a rifle with, the same hands that had ended lives without hesitation. Now those hands had saved one. The contrast twisted me, filled me with a guilt so sharp I nearly doubled over. But in the hollow of that guilt, something else bloomed. Reverence. A kind of holy fear. The kind that made me want to kneel in the snow, to bow my head before this wounded mother who had chosen not to destroy me, but to share her burden instead. She trusted me with her secret. That thought alone made my throat ache. She hadn't needed me anymore. Her cub was free, cradled against her chest. Yet she had led me here anyway, into the heart of her sorrow, so I would carry it too, and I knew I would. Even if no one else believed me, even if I never spoke of this night aloud, I would carry it. Her stare carved it into my bones. I wanted to look away, to bury the truth before it shattered me. For a fleeting moment, I thought maybe I could. Maybe I could walk back to my cabin, close the door, drink myself numb, and forget. I thought I could push this night into the shadows of memory, let it fade until it was nothing but a dream. I thought I could pretend it never happened, but I was wrong. What she gave me could never be forgotten. It would follow me like breath itself, deeper than guilt, sharper than fear, brighter than reverence. I thought I could leave it behind, but I couldn't, because the forest had claimed me, and her truth would live in me forever. For a long time, we stood there in the clearing, the broken trap between us, the cub pressed against her chest. I felt as if the world had stopped turning. Time had collapsed into silence. It was only her, the little one, and me, three beings bound together by something I couldn't name. Then she shifted, slowly, with a heaviness that seemed to come from the earth itself. She turned her great body away from me. The cub whimpered, a weak but living sound, and she carried him deeper into the forest. I thought that was it, that she had shown me what I needed to see, and now she was returning to her own world, leaving me behind in mine. But just before the darkness swallowed her, she stopped. She turned her head one last time, and our eyes met again. That gaze pierced me more than any claw could. It wasn't just gratitude. It wasn't just warning. It was something far greater. In her eyes, I saw forgiveness, as if she had looked through my past, through the hunts, through the blood on my hands, and chosen to let it go. And I saw something else, something that cracked me open. Recognition. She looked at me as if I were not her enemy, as if, for that one impossible moment, I was hers. She looked at me as if I were her own. My chest shattered, my throat burned with tears I couldn't hold back. I felt so small and yet so seen, so terrified and yet so safe, all in the same breath. Then she was gone. She melted into the trees, her cub clutched close, the forest folding around her until there was nothing left but the echo of her breathing in my ears. I stood there shaking, my lantern trembling in my hand, staring into the black where she had vanished. My legs gave way, and I sank to my knees in the snow, sobbing like a child. I don't know how long I stayed there. The cold gnawed at my skin, the lantern's flame sputtered low, and still I couldn't move. I kept replaying it, her gaze, that impossible nod, that final look, every second of it etched into me like fire. When I finally rose, I walked back through the forest in a daze, the branches that scraped my coat, the snow that crunched under my boots, none of it felt real. I stumbled into my cabin like a man stepping into someone else's life. The walls looked smaller. The rifle above the mantel seemed like a relic from another world. The silence pressed against me, heavy with the weight of everything I'd seen. I set the lantern down with shaking hands. My palms were still smeared with dried blood from the cub. I held them up to the dim light, staring at them, and for the first time in my life, I hated what they had once done, but I also saw what they had done tonight, and in that, maybe, was a redemption. I sat by the stove until dawn, unable to sleep, unable to think of anything but her eyes. If someone had told me this story, if they had sworn to me that a wild bear could look at a man with gratitude, with trust, with forgiveness, I would have laughed in their face. I would have called it fantasy, a lie, a foolish dream. But I saw it. I saw her, and I will carry it until the day I die. She looked at me as if I were her own, and I know now, with a certainty that shakes me to the core, that nature is wiser than we can ever understand. If someone else had told this tale, I would not have believed it, but I was there. I saw it with my own eyes. Nature is wiser than us. Nature is wiser than me. If somebody told me this story, I would have said it was impossible, but I saw it myself, and I believe now. Nature is wiser than us. If you too believe in a special bond with animals, write in the comments. We are not alone in this world.